They told us war would be fought by men in uniforms, far away, somewhere we'd never see. They were lying. I was just a kid when the voice on the wireless changed forever. Calm, cold, certain. Britain is at war with Germany. It didn't sound like fear. It didn't sound like death. Not yet. At 7 years old, war didn't come with explosions at first. It came quietly, with shovels digging our gardens, with curved sheets of metal buried like coffins in the earth, with gas masks that made us look like pigs gasping for breath. They said it was for our safety. I didn't feel safe. Then one morning, standing on top of our shelter, I saw them. Gray monsters floating in the sky, huge, silent, watching. "Ma'am," I shouted, "there's elephants in the sky." That's when I knew something was wrong. Soon the nights grew darker, the air smelled different. Men whispered, mothers prayed, and the planes came, always going one way, never coming back. They sent us away after that, away from bombs, away from fire, away from childhood. This isn't a story about heroes with medals. This is about a boy, a grandmother, and a world falling apart, one siren at a time.
I didn't understand war the day it was announced. None of us kids did. I was barely 5 or 6 when I left my 9, my grandmother, in Place Benyon. That place felt like the safest corner of the world. Stone walls, green hills, and my 9's hands that always smelled of soap and coal dust. Then my parents moved to Liverpool because my dad found work. I didn't know it then, but that move placed us right under the shadow of what was coming. The day everything changed didn't come with screaming or explosions. It came through a voice. A calm, confident man on the wireless. He always said his name before speaking, like it mattered. Later I learned it was probably Alvar Liddell. He said Britain was at war with Germany. No shouting, no panic, just facts, like he was reading the weather. At 7 years old, that meant nothing. But then things started happening. One morning, lorries rolled into our street and dumped strange curved corrugated metal sheets into every back garden. Neighbors didn't ask questions, they just grabbed shovels. Men, women, anyone with strength, digging massive holes like we were burying something alive. Those sheets became Anderson shelters, half underground, covered with earth. They told us it was a bedroom, a bomb-proof bedroom. That word, bomb, stuck in my head. Next came the gas masks, cardboard boxes with strings, slung over our shoulders like school bags from hell. Alvar Liddell told us we had to carry them everywhere. The masks had rubber snouts, stiff and ugly. Every few weeks they added filters, and the snouts grew longer. I remember thinking they looked like Pinocchio's nose. Babies had special masks, Mickey Mouse ones, covering their whole faces. They looked friendly, but nothing about them felt safe. Then one early morning, while climbing on top of our shelter, I saw something no sober person should ever see. Huge grey shapes floating in the sky. They were fat-bellied, with wide ears and long noses hanging upside down. No legs, no sound, just hanging there. "Ma'am," I yelled, "there's elephants in the sky." They laughed, but it wasn't funny. They were barrage balloons, filled with gas, designed to tear the wings off German planes if they flew too low. That was the moment war stopped being a word and started being real. Soon after, the wireless spoke again. Children in bombed cities were to be evacuated to the countryside. If you had relatives there, you could go. Thousands were moved to Wales. I went back to my 9. I thought I was escaping the war. I was wrong. Even Place Benyon wasn't safe. Lorries hauled red ash from old coal banks to build roads and factories around Wrexham. Soldiers arrived. Camps went up in the old colliery ruins. Nissen huts, searchlights, guards with rifles. At night, the searchlights stabbed the sky, hunting bombers heading for Liverpool. The planes always went over us. We never heard them coming back. One night, bombs fell on the mountain. Dry weather turned sparks into hellfire. The hills burned for a week. Smoke travelled miles. German radio bragged about factories destroyed. Some bombs didn't explode at all. Villagers gathered as the army detonated them. The sound was dull, disappointing, like war mocking us. Shelters were built everywhere. Old tunnels, cork cellars. People dragged blankets and pillows, desperate for safety. Some shelters filled with smoke, others filled with fear. In the end, most people went back to their own beds, because even danger feels normal after a while. And that was just the beginning.
Going back to my Nain's house in Plas Benyon felt like rewinding life. Same stone walls, same quiet lanes, same hills that hugged the village like nothing bad could ever cross them. For a while, it almost worked. I slept better, I breathed easier. I thought the war had stayed behind in Liverpool. It hadn't. The first sign was the darkness. Not night, real darkness. Blackout darkness. Every window was covered, every crack sealed. No glow, no lamps, no forgiveness. One careless sliver of light could invite death from the sky. Old habits died fast. Even lighting a candle felt like committing a crime. Then the soldiers arrived. Lorries rolled in and stopped near the old bee-pit banks, where ancient colliery walls still stood like bones from another age. Soldiers turned that forgotten place into a camp. 3 big Nissen huts, curved and metallic, popped up like steel mushrooms. A cookhouse followed, a guard post. Suddenly, Plas Benyon had uniforms, rifles, and men who didn't smile much. Searchlights came next. One small one to measure cloud height, one massive one to hunt. Every night, when German bombers droned toward Liverpool, those beams cut the sky open. Anyone brave or stupid enough to step outside during blackout hours saw the night explode with light. White beams crossed and danced like angry fingers, searching for shapes that didn't belong. The planes always passed overhead, and strangely, we never heard them return. That silence was worse than the noise. One night, bombs fell on the mountain. Not close enough to kill us, close enough to remind us. The dry ground caught fire, and soon the hills burned from Garth to Minera. Flames ran wild for days. Smoke traveled miles. The Germans had hit something important, or they thought they had. German radio cracked into our airwaves. Lord Haw-Haw, William Joyce. His voice oozed confidence as he bragged about factories destroyed. He claimed Monsanto factory in Sefton was gone, burned to ash. People whispered, feared the worst. But the old works down by the River Dee kept producing, hidden, alive, like us. Bombs landed in strange places, too. One hit Wynne Hall but did no harm. Another dropped in Christianed and didn't explode. The army came. Villagers gathered like it was a fair. Sandbags piled up. Then, boom. A weak bang, almost embarrassing. The most famous bomb fell in Osborne Street, Rose. A woman came out early, broom in hand, and calmly swept debris into the fresh bomb hole. She was killed instantly. People said she went straight to heaven, where she could brush forever. After that, fear changed shape. Shelters were built again. Someone remembered an old tunnel under the bee-pit banks. Thick stone, curved roof, 4 feet high. The safest place in the world, the old men said. Families moved in with blankets, pillows, hope. Buckets of fire were lit to keep the air warm. It backfired. The smoke turned to sick. People coughed, wheezed, eyes burned. The safest place became a slow killer. The tunnel was abandoned. Then Di Davies, the caretaker at Ruabon Grammar School, tried to save everyone. He opened the massive coke cellar under the school. Night after night, villagers trekked across fields to sleep on sharp heaps of coke. It sounded noble. It felt miserable. People gave up, went home. That was the lesson of wartime Britain. Fear has limits. Routine doesn't. Back at the army camp, a soldier stood guard day and night, rifle loaded, serious face. What he didn't know was that kids always find a way. We had a secret path through the bushes, straight to the cookhouse. Vince, the cook, ruled that place like a king. The smell alone could drag you through mud. Vince was clear, unofficially. If you were polite, you ate. Meat pies, thick corned beef buddies, fuel for kids playing football, cowboys and Indians, pretending the world wasn't on fire. War was everywhere, but childhood still fought back.
The war didn't always come with bombs. Sometimes it came with empty plates. Food changed first. Not the taste, the rules. Everything needed a ration book. Shopkeepers would snip little squares out of it like they were cutting pieces from your life. Sugar, butter, meat, cheese. Each cut mattered. You learned quickly what was worth buying and what wasn't. One thing we realized fast: rabbit was king. Almost every main meal involved rabbit in some form. Stew, pie, fried, baked. Early mornings, men on bicycles rolled back into the village. Poachers. Their handlebars and frames decorated with red and white-bellied rabbits swinging like trophies. The colors told the story. They'd already been gutted in the fields. Efficient. Brutal. There was a rule. Rabbits were only eaten when there was an R in the month. The rest of the year they were breeding. War taught even hunger to follow rules. Posters appeared everywhere. Dig for victory. Every scrap of land was torn up. Gardens became battlefields of carrots, potatoes, cabbage. Cow muck was piled high, steaming, stinking, waiting to be dug in. You could smell food before you ever saw it. Many houses kept pigs. It made sense. Earth toilets already smelled bad. Adding a pigsty nearby kept everything in one place. The pigs ate peelings, scraps, whatever the neighbors could spare. Everyone fed the pig. Everyone owned the pig. And one day, the pig paid its debt. The village quiet would shatter with squealing. You'd follow the sound and find the animal tied to a wall, knife out, water boiling in the wash house. The pig would die fast, cleanly, no ceremony, just survival. Kids were given the pig's bladder to blow up. Not round, not pretty, but good enough to kick around like a football. Neighbors who helped feed it got a share. The rest was hung from ceilings in the coldest room of the house. Nothing was wasted. Nothing could be. Coal miners got extra cheese rations, fuel for hellish work underground. But many younger men didn't want cheese. They wanted out. They volunteered for the forces. Sunny lands, foreign skies. Some left smiling. Many never came back. Women carried the weight of everything else. Those working in war factories wore ROF on their sleeves, Royal Ordnance Factory. That badge let them jump food queues. Time saved meant shells made faster. Even hunger had a hierarchy. Farmers got clever. Milk was skimmed. Cream was churned into butter, quietly, secretly. There was also the black market, stolen food, illegal trade. Everyone knew about it. Everyone pretended they didn't. If you had money, rules bent. Every village had its defenders. The home guard marched proudly in uniforms that didn't quite fit, carrying imitation rifles. The auxiliary fire service wore boiler suits, helmets, wellies. They trained every Sunday, pumping water from streams. They gave us hoses to play with. Water fights broke out. We laughed until our clothes soaked through, and mothers scolded us for ruining the little we had. We also made bonies, bicycles without brakes or power. We'd freewheel down the steepest hills, chasing speed like idiots. One day, at full tilt, we smashed straight through a home guard parade marching 3 abreast. A German tank couldn't have scattered them better. War met childhood. Childhood won. Briefly. Rumors spread like fire. The Germans would poison the water. Mothers filled every bath, every bucket with water from Penny Kai Reservoir. Sparkling, safe, saved. Fear makes people prepare for disasters that never come. Through it all, Sunday nights stayed sacred. Churches filled. The vicar read out names of local men serving in the forces, missing, killed, prayed for. Sitting there, I wondered something dangerous. Were German churches doing the same? And if they were, which prayers would God listen to?
By the time the war settled into our bones, it stopped feeling temporary. It felt permanent. That's when the uniforms started appearing, not just on soldiers, but on us. Every village had an ACF, Army Cadet Force. We were barely more than boys, but they handed us long trousers, thick cloth, itchy collars. We wore them like armor. You could stand taller in a uniform, even if your legs still shook. The trousers told stories, different shades, different stains, proof they'd been used before and for far more serious things. Officers taught us how to march, left, right, together. They drilled discipline into us before we fully understood fear. We learned how to hold rifles, how to stand still, how not to laugh when your feet hurt and your stomach growled. Then came the range. Real guns, real bullets. The first shot made my heart slam into my throat. The kick surprised me. The smell of cordite stayed in my nose for days. No one said it out loud, but we all felt it. This wasn't a game anymore. Every summer they took us away for 2 weeks. A real army barracks, real tents, straw beds that scratched your skin and smelled of old hay. We paraded on a proper square, marched to a real army band. For a moment, we weren't pretending. We were training to become something none of us wanted to admit we might have to be. Nearby, something new appeared. Americans. We called them Yanks. They were camped in Erdig Park and Bersham, and they didn't feel like war. They felt like the future. Their camp was clean, organized, almost glamorous. They invited the cadets over sometimes, and walking into their world felt like stepping into a movie. They had chewing gum, real cigarettes, tins of apricots and pineapples, things we'd only heard about. They laughed loud, talked fast, smelled different. Their uniforms looked sharper, their boots newer. But what fascinated them most wasn't us, it was our older sisters. Many of those girls married American soldiers, some left Britain forever, shipped off across the Atlantic into stories we'd never hear properly again. Back home, mothers held everything together. They queued for hours. They patched trousers, turned worn collars inside out. My Nain could make clothes last years longer than they should have. Nothing was thrown away. Everything was reused. Fear came back in strange forms. There was a rumor, again, that the Germans would poison the water supply. Every tub was filled, every bucket stacked. The house smelled clean for once, like soap and panic. And yet, life kept sneaking in joy where it could. Football saved us. Wrexham had one of the best teams in Britain during the war, not because of money, because of soldiers. Camps were everywhere, and servicemen were allowed to play for the nearest club. The team became a mix of English, Scottish, Irish, and Welsh internationals. They dominated their league. For 90 minutes, war didn't matter. Every Sunday night, churches were packed. The vicar read names aloud, missing, killed, serving. Prayers filled the air like smoke. Sitting in the pew, I thought again about German children, German churches, German prayers, and wondered if God was tired of choosing sides. By then, the war wasn't just outside anymore. It had crawled inside us, and it wasn't leaving quietly.
By now, war wasn't loud anymore.
It was tired. People stopped jumping at every siren. Blackouts became habit. Ration books felt like part of your body, something you never questioned, just carried. The excitement, the fear, even the anger had worn thin. What remained was waiting. Waiting for letters, waiting for names, waiting for news that didn't hurt. Every house had someone missing something. A son, a husband, a brother, a future. Some families waited with hope. Others waited knowing nothing was coming back. Sundays carried a special weight. Church bells rang, but softer somehow. The vicar stood taller than his years, his voice steady but tired. He read names slowly, carefully, as if speed might make death careless. Some names stopped appearing. Those families didn't need reminding. Mothers cried quietly. Fathers stared forward. Children learned how grief looked before they learned how it felt. Outside church, life pretended to go on. Home Guard still paraded, a little slower now, fewer jokes. The auxiliary fire service kept drilling, pumping water from streams, practicing for fires that might come any night. We still joked with them, still begged for hose pipes to play with. But even play felt different, shorter, sharper, like time itself was rationed. At home, Nain stayed busy, hands moving always, knitting, sewing, repairing. She could take a worn shirt and make it feel new again by turning the collar, patching the elbows, tightening seams. She said nothing about the war. She didn't need to. Her silence carried more weight than speeches. Rumors kept coming. Germany this, poison that, new weapons, secret plans. Some believed everything. Others believed nothing. Most people believed whatever helped them sleep. Food was still scarce. Rabbit came and went. Potatoes saved lives. Bread was stretched, sliced thin. Butter was gold. Sugar felt mythical. But hunger wasn't dramatic anymore. It was routine. You didn't complain. Complaining wasted energy. The black market thrived quietly. No shouting, no signs, just whispers and nods. People who swore they'd never break the rules found themselves doing it anyway. Survival rewrites morals. The American soldiers were still around. Some left, some stayed, some married and vanished into stories told once and then never again. Their camps felt less magical now. The novelty had faded. They were soldiers too, just like ours, just as tired. Cadet training continued, but something had changed. We still marched, still shot, still learned, but now we understood why. The jokes stopped faster. The seriousness arrived earlier. Childhood was packing its bags. At night, the wireless stayed on longer. We waited for that voice. Alvar Little had started it all for us, calm, clear, controlled. In our minds, he'd end it too. We imagined him saying the words carefully, like always. The war is over. Until then, every broadcast felt like holding your breath underwater. One night, lying in bed, I listened to the silence outside. No planes, no searchlights, no fire, just wind in the hills. It felt dangerous in a new way, like quiet before something big. I thought about German kids again, wondered if they lay awake like me, listening, hoping for the same words, wondered if they were as tired of being brave. War had taught us many things: how to dig, how to hide, how to share, how to lose. But the hardest lesson was this: you don't stop living during war, you just live around it. And we were all waiting, not for victory, not for revenge, but for permission to breathe again.
By now, fear didn't announce itself anymore. It didn't crash through the door with sirens or explosions. It sat quietly in the corner, like an old guest nobody asked to leave. We learned to live with it. The blackout curtains stayed up even on calm nights, not because planes were coming, but because habits are harder to break than fear. Windows felt naked without them. Light felt reckless. People spoke softer now, not because of spies, but because loud hope hurt more when it broke. The village looked the same, but it wasn't. Shops opened late and closed early. Shelves were half empty, but no one stared anymore. You took what you could, nodded thanks, and moved on. Complaining felt childish. Everyone had already paid their share. Men who came home on leave looked older than their fathers. They smiled, but their eyes stayed somewhere else, somewhere loud, somewhere burning. They didn't talk much, and nobody pushed. Kids stopped asking questions. At first, we'd asked everything. Why this? Why them? Why now? Now we just watched. Watched uniforms pass through, watched mothers count ration coupons twice, watched empty chairs stay empty. Nain once said, quietly, "This war has stolen voices." I didn't understand at the time. Later I did. Nighttime was the worst. Not because of bombs, but because of thinking. The mind wandered where the body didn't dare. You imagined footsteps that weren't there, planes that never came, news that hadn't arrived yet. Sometimes the searchlights still moved, slow and careful, slicing the clouds like tired fingers. When they caught nothing, they shut down again. Even the sky seemed exhausted. We heard about places far away: Normandy, Italy, Russia. Names that meant nothing before now carried weight like gravestones. Maps became personal. Every arrow felt like a life being pushed forward. The Home Guard still marched, but their boots didn't hit the ground as hard. Some rifles were real now. Some drills weren't practice anymore. One evening, a woman collapsed in the street. Not from injury, from waiting. She'd received a letter, thin, official, final. No screaming, no drama, just knees giving way. 2 neighbors lifted her up without a word. Everyone understood. Grief had rules now: private, quiet, efficient. Food shortages worsened, but people adapted. Soups became thinner, bread got smaller, but no one starved alone. If someone had a little extra, it found its way to someone who didn't. Pride meant less than survival. Kids still played, but games changed. War wasn't pretend anymore. It had rules, strategies, consequences. When someone died in play, they didn't jump up laughing. They lay still longer than necessary, staring at the sky. That scared the adults more than bombs ever had. The wireless stayed on almost constantly. Every crackle made hearts jump. Every pause felt dangerous. Alvar Liddell's voice still carried authority, but even he sounded tired now. Less ceremony, more weight. We knew something was coming. You could feel it in the air, like pressure before a storm. Not victory, not peace, something bigger, something final. One night, I lay awake listening to the wind move through the hills and thought, what happens when this ends? No sirens, no shelters, no excuses. Just us, standing in the quiet, figuring out who we'd become. War had shaped us without asking, and whatever came next, we knew it wouldn't give us back what it took.
Hope didn't arrive with trumpets. It crept back in, careful not to wake disappointment. At first, it was just rumors. Someone said the Germans were retreating in France. Someone else said Italy had fallen. Nobody celebrated. We'd learned better than that. But the rumors didn't stop. They stacked up, small pieces forming a picture nobody dared say out loud. The wireless changed tone. Alvar Liddell still spoke with calm authority, but now there were pauses, not heavy ones, just thoughtful. Victories were mentioned without hesitation. Losses were still there, but they no longer swallowed everything else. Maps on kitchen walls started to look different. Arrows moved the right way, slowly, carefully, forward. Men home on leave began talking again. Not much, not details, but enough. They talked about fields instead of trenches, about food instead of fire, about what they'd do after. That word started appearing everywhere. After. After the war, after rationing, after the waiting. Mothers noticed it first. They still queued, still counted coupons, still made miracles out of scraps. But now they planned, quietly, a dress for later, a cupboard repaired someday, seeds saved not just for survival, but for plenty. The Home Guard parades changed, still proud, still serious, but smiles slipped through more often now. Someone even whistled once. That hadn't happened in years. American soldiers appeared more frequently. Their camps buzzed with energy. Laughter carried farther than before. They shared cigarettes without counting. Chewing gum became common. So did big talk about going home, about winning. They sounded sure. That scared us more than bombs ever had, because certainty was dangerous. Air raids became rare. When sirens did sound, people hesitated. Some didn't even move at first, old instincts fighting new reality. Eventually, they'd shrug, grab coats, and head to shelters more out of habit than fear. The sky felt different. Searchlights stayed dark more often. Balloons sagged lower. Even the night seemed less hostile. Children noticed before adults admitted it. Games got louder, running lasted longer, laughter returned without apology. Scraped knees mattered again. That was how you knew things were changing. One Sunday, church was fuller than ever. Not from fear, from gratitude. The vicar named fewer missing, fewer dead, more returned. When prayers ended, people stayed seated longer, as if standing might break the moment. Nain squeezed my hand and whispered, "It's nearly over." She didn't sound relieved. She sounded cautious. Because everyone knew wars don't end cleanly. They leave things behind. Habits, silences, memories that don't unpack easily. We began to imagine peace, not as a celebration, but as a responsibility. How do you live without rules you hated but relied on? How do you stop waiting when waiting kept you safe? No one had answers, but for the first time in years, the question wasn't if the war would end, it was when. And that was enough to let hope breathe again.
November turned cold, sharper than the bombs ever were. The nights stretched long, the fires in hearths flickered weak against the wind, and everyone held their breath, not for sirens, but for news. The wireless became a heartbeat. Every broadcast was a small heartbeat, carrying whispers from London, from Paris, from the front. We listened to Alvar Liddell as if he controlled the sun and moon. One word from him could make the world shift. Letters from the front arrived more frequently now. Every envelope smelled of sweat, gun oil, and paper. Sometimes a letter carried a name we feared lost. Sometimes a letter carried a signature that let us breathe again. People walked slower, thought more, measured each movement. The war wasn't over yet, not officially, but we all moved as if it could be. At the camp, the soldiers laughed more freely. They practiced drills with precision, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation. Cigarettes were smoked openly, boots polished faster, letters written longer. The young ones kept peeking at the horizon, imagining what they'd see when morning came that wouldn't smell of smoke. Every night, Plas Benyon seemed smaller, closer, and more fragile. The air carried a tension. something waiting to break or bloom. Every dog barked as if warning the world. Every child's cry seemed louder than it should. We were aware of time, of the thin line between survival and history in the making. One evening, the German broadcasts shifted slightly. Lord Haw-Haw spoke fewer times, his voice less commanding. Rumours swirled, retreat. Some whispered that the factories near Wexham were abandoned. The fires that had scarred the mountains faded into smoke trails that looked almost peaceful against the sky. Hope didn't roar, it murmured. Families spoke in hushed tones. Women mended clothes and knitted quietly, glancing out windows at every vehicle passing the hills. Men paced. Older children watched radios intently, gripping every word. In the silence between news, 9 would hum old tunes, as if trying to remind us that some things don't change. The war had invaded everything, even joy, but the song reminded us there could be a life after it. On one night, a whisper spread. The Yanks have reached the Rhine. A cheer was muffled in a bedroom. A dog barked as if understanding. The sky didn't explode with fireworks, but stars seemed brighter, sharper. Every heart waited for the first confirmation, the first honest announcement that all this suffering, all these hidden fears and long nights might be ending. And in that waiting, we felt something we hadn't felt for years. Freedom. Not yet real, not yet tangible, but possible. And sometimes hope alone can be the fiercest thing in the world. It feeds you, protects you, moves you. Even when bombs still drop and sirens still wail, hope is enough to keep you breathing, imagining, and living. The end of the war wasn't a sudden moment. It was a series of small tremors, whispers, footsteps, and quiet looks exchanged across living rooms, kitchens, and dark fields. November 1940-something, we were in that trembling moment, and it was perfect, terrifyingly, beautifully perfect.
April turned to May, and the tension in Plasbenyan grew unbearable. Every whisper of the wireless carried news, every rumor a spark. The war had stretched long enough for time itself to feel frozen. Then, one crisp morning, it happened. Alvar Liddell's voice came over the radio, steady and clear, reading words that seemed impossible. Germany has surrendered. Hostilities in Europe have ceased. Peace has returned. For a moment, silence swallowed the village. Windows were opened. Dogs barked in confusion. Smoke from chimneys rose lazily, as if taking its first breath in years. Children poured into the streets, shouting, running, laughing without restraint. The air smelled different, not of coal or smoke, but of freedom. Families embraced, strangers shook hands. Even the old men who had endured the bombs, the air raids, the cold, lifted their eyes skyward, smiling at a sun that finally felt warm. In Plasbenyan, church bells rang. The vicar read names of the survivors, prayed for the fallen, and gave thanks for peace. Women wept quietly, their hands raw from mending and cooking, their eyes wet with relief. Men in uniform removed helmets, kissed children, and wept like boys. Across the village, flags appeared, homemade, patched together, waving in every breeze. The blackouts no longer mattered. The shelters were abandoned, their doors swinging open to the light. For the first time in years, the war was not a shadow over Plasbenyan, it was a memory. At the army camp, soldiers cheered. Rations and routines could finally relax.
Letters flew faster than ever before, spreading news to every corner of Britain. Even the youngest children, once evacuated, once terrified of the sky, could now imagine a world beyond air raids and gas masks. And yet, amidst the celebrations, a quiet respect lingered. No one forgot the lives lost. No one forgot the nights spent in shelters, the fires on distant mountains, or the tension in every whisper. The war had ended, but its mark would remain in every face, every heart, every home. That night, Plasbennian was alive in a way it hadn't been since the world tilted on the edge of chaos. People danced, songs echoed through streets and hills. Children slept peacefully, unafraid. The horizon no longer held smoke or fear. For Alan Jeffries and thousands like him, life could finally breathe again. The radios would still broadcast news from afar, but this news, the peace, was theirs to keep. And from that night on, Plasbennian would never forget the moment hope finally became reality.
The war was over, but life in Plasbennian had to find its rhythm again. Children who once hid under Anderson shelters now ran freely across the fields, their laughter filling the air where once the silence of fear had reigned. Alan Jeffries, now a little older, walked the village paths that he had known all his life. Every corner, every stone, every burnt patch of earth held memories of air raids, fires, and whispered warnings. He paused at the old coal banks, now silent, where soldiers once camped and searchlights had measured the night sky. The air was calm, almost surreal, a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous years. Families rebuilt homes, patched roofs, replanted gardens. Women who had stitched and patched clothing now prepared feasts with laughter instead of anxiety. The smell of fresh bread and roasting meat replaced the smoke and soot that had lingered for so long. In schools, the evacuated children returned, eager to learn in safe classrooms. Teachers shared stories of courage and endurance, ensuring that the lessons of survival were passed down. Alan remembered how his own Nain had welcomed him back with open arms, and how her kitchen smelled of warmth and home. It was a small comfort, but it reminded him that life endured, even after devastation. At night, the stars seemed brighter, clearer. The barrage balloons, gas masks, and blackout curtains were gone. The sky, once a warning, was now a canvas for dreams. People gathered in fields to celebrate harvests, music played, and dances resumed in village halls that had long stood empty. Alan reflected on the sacrifices, the fathers, brothers, and sons who never returned. He remembered the small triumphs, a rabbit caught, a rationed meal, a letter from a distant soldier. Those moments, though minor in the grand scale of war, had kept spirits alive. They were the threads that stitched the community together, even under the darkest clouds. The story of Plasbennian during the war became legend, shared across generations. The villagers spoke of courage, resilience, and the importance of looking out for each other. Alan Jeffries, once a child watching elephants float in the sky, grew into a man who understood that survival wasn't just about avoiding bombs, it was about hope, ingenuity, and community. As peace settled fully across the land, Alan looked toward the horizon. The war was a memory, etched in hearts and history, but life, unbroken, stubborn, and hopeful, moved forward. He smiled at the fields, the homes, the families thriving once again. And he knew, without a doubt, that Plasbennian would endure, its story of resilience and courage forever engraved in the fabric of its hills and valleys.